Welcome to an action-packed NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, where speed, strategy, aggressive racing, and dramatic moments came together for another unforgettable chapter of the 2026 season. The Granite State's famous short track once again provided the perfect setting for intense NASCAR Truck Series competition. New Hampshire Motor Speedway is known for its flat layout, tight corners, difficult passing zones, and the unique challenge of maintaining momentum around the entire circuit. At this track, one small mistake can completely change the outcome of a race. As the trucks rolled onto the track, the atmosphere was electric. Drivers knew that this would not simply be a test of raw speed. Tire management, braking, restarts, pit strategy, and patience would all play a major role. The green flag dropped, and immediately the field charged into Turn 1. The opening laps were fast and aggressive, with drivers fighting for every position. The lead pack quickly began to separate from the rest of the field, while battles continued throughout the running order. At New Hampshire, drivers have to be extremely precise. The corners may look simple, but the flat track makes it difficult to rotate the truck and maintain speed. A driver who pushes too hard can easily lose grip, while someone who saves the tires can become much stronger later in a run. That strategy became increasingly important as the race continued. The leaders settled into a rhythm, but behind them, the competition was anything but calm. Trucks raced side by side, sometimes only inches apart. Every corner presented an opportunity to gain a position, but every aggressive move also carried the risk of contact. One of the biggest stories of the race was the battle at the front. The race leader had to deal with constant pressure from the trucks behind. Every time the leader entered a corner, another driver was looking for a chance to close the gap. The pressure was relentless, and there was no room for even a small mistake. Meanwhile, the middle of the pack produced some of the most entertaining racing of the day. Drivers went three wide in certain sections, fighting desperately to move forward. Some trucks gained several positions through smart moves, while others lost ground after getting trapped in traffic. Then came one of the key moments of the race. A battle for position became extremely intense, with two trucks running side by side through the corner. Neither driver wanted to give up the position, and the trucks came dangerously close to making contact. For a moment, it looked like the situation could turn into a major incident. That is exactly what makes the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series so exciting. The drivers are competing for valuable points, but they are also trying to prove themselves against some of the best young and experienced racers in NASCAR. As the laps continued to disappear, pit strategy became a major factor. Crew chiefs had to decide when to bring their drivers onto pit road. A perfectly timed pit stop could gain several positions, while a slow stop or poorly timed caution could completely change the race. The pit crews worked quickly, changing tires, adding fuel, and making adjustments to the trucks. Every second mattered. When the field returned to green flag racing, the running order looked different, and suddenly several drivers found themselves with a chance to compete for the win. The restart created another intense battle. Drivers pushed hard into the first corner, trying to gain positions before the field could settle down. Some trucks moved forward aggressively, while others had to back out of the throttle to avoid contact. The battle for the lead became even more exciting as the laps began to wind down. At this stage of the race, tire management became critical. Drivers who had abused their tires earlier were beginning to struggle, while those who had carefully managed their equipment were becoming stronger. Every lap brought a new challenge. The leader could not relax. The second-place truck remained within striking distance, waiting for an opportunity. Every time the leader entered a corner, the gap changed. Sometimes it looked like the leader was pulling away, and then suddenly the challenger would gain several truck lengths. The crowd could feel the tension building. With only a handful of laps remaining, the race entered its most important stage. There was no more room for conservative driving. Drivers had to make their moves now. Behind the leaders, another fierce battle developed for a top 5 position. Two trucks raced side by side lap after lap, refusing to give up. Their tires were worn, their trucks were sliding, and the pressure was enormous. Then came the final restart. The trucks lined up once again, and everyone knew that the remaining laps could produce absolute chaos. The green flag waved. The field accelerated toward turn 1. The leader got a strong launch, but the challenger stayed close. Behind them, several trucks made aggressive moves, with drivers trying to gain as many positions as possible before the race reached the final lap. The final laps were all about execution. The leader protected the inside line and focused on hitting every corner perfectly. The challenger searched for another lane, hoping to find enough speed to make one final attack. Coming into the final corner, the gap was still incredibly small. The leader exited the turn with momentum and headed toward the finish line. The checkered flag waved. Victory belonged to the driver, who managed the pressure, the tires, the strategy, and the final restart better than everyone else. Behind the winner, the rest of the field crossed the line after an intense battle that showcased exactly why the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series remains one of the most exciting forms of racing in America. New Hampshire Motor Speedway once again delivered everything fans could ask for. Close racing, aggressive battles, strategic pit stops, dramatic restarts, and a finish that kept everyone watching until the final lap. But the story does not end with the checkered flag. Every driver leaves New Hampshire with something to take away. Some teams will celebrate strong finishes and valuable points. Others will go back to the shop searching for answers after a difficult afternoon. For championship contenders, every position matters. A few extra points can become extremely valuable later in the season, especially when the championship battle becomes tighter. For young drivers, races like this provide an important opportunity to gain experience. Learning how to manage tires, traffic, restarts, and pressure at a demanding track like New Hampshire can make a major difference in a driver's development. And for the fans, the race delivered another reminder of why NASCAR Truck Series racing is so unpredictable. One moment, a driver can look completely dominant. The next moment, a caution, pit stop, tire issue, or aggressive restart can change everything. That unpredictability is what makes every race worth watching. The 2026 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season continues to produce incredible competition, and New Hampshire Motor Speedway added another exciting chapter to the story. From the opening green flag to the final checkered flag, the drivers pushed themselves and their trucks to the limit. There were battles for the lead. There were battles throughout the pack. There were strategic decisions that changed the running order. And there was the constant pressure that comes with competing at one of NASCAR's most challenging short tracks. So, if you're a NASCAR fan, this race was one you definitely did not want to miss. The Craftsman Truck Series continues to prove that its combination of young talent, experienced drivers, powerful trucks, and unpredictable racing creates some of the most entertaining action on the NASCAR calendar. New Hampshire brought the speed, the drivers brought the aggression, the crews brought the strategy, and the fans brought the energy. In the end, only one driver could take the checkered flag, but the entire field contributed to a race filled with memorable moments. This was the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series at New Hampshire Motor Speedway in 2026, full of speed, drama, strategy, and nonstop racing action. And as the season continues, the championship battle is only going to get more intense. The 2026 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season continues to deliver the kind of racing that keeps fans on the edge of their seats, and New Hampshire Motor Speedway provided another perfect stage for high-pressure short-track competition. Known as the Magic Mile, New Hampshire is a completely different challenge compared with many other NASCAR tracks. The circuit is relatively flat, the corners are tight, and drivers have to carefully balance braking, throttle control, tire management, and momentum. That combination makes every lap important. Before the race even began, teams knew that qualifying position could be extremely valuable. Track position is always important at New Hampshire, but it becomes even more critical when the field is closely matched. As the trucks prepared for the start, the grandstands were filled with fans waiting for another intense afternoon of NASCAR racing. The green flag finally waved. The trucks exploded into Turn 1, with the drivers immediately fighting for position. The opening laps were aggressive but controlled, as everyone tried to find the best racing line and understand how their trucks would react to the changing track conditions. The early stages of the race quickly showed that nobody was going to give away positions easily. At the front, the leaders began establishing their pace. The trucks behind them formed several groups, with drivers battling side by side throughout the field. One driver might gain a position on the straightaway, only to lose it again entering the next corner. Another driver might run the high line for several laps before moving down to the inside. At New Hampshire, patience can be just as important as aggression. A driver who attacks too early can destroy the tires and become vulnerable later in the run. A driver who waits too long may find that the opportunity has disappeared. That delicate balance became one of the major themes of the race. As the first green flag run continued, tire wear began to affect the handling of the trucks. Some drivers reported that their trucks were becoming tighter, while others struggled with rear grip. The crew chiefs listened carefully to their drivers and began planning their next moves. Pit strategy was going to be crucial. When the first caution period arrived, the entire complexion of the race changed. Some teams decided to pit immediately. Others stayed on the track to gain track position. It was a classic NASCAR strategic gamble. Staying out could put a driver at the front for the restart, but it also meant having older tires. Pitting provided fresh tires, but the driver would have to restart deeper in the field. There was no perfect answer. The restart was intense. The field accelerated toward turn 1, and drivers immediately began making moves. Three-wide racing appeared in parts of the pack, with trucks running extremely close together. One small mistake could trigger a major incident. The battle for the lead became particularly interesting as the top drivers began trading positions. The leader protected the bottom lane, while the challenger searched for a way around the outside. The outside line can be difficult at New Hampshire, but when a driver gets enough momentum, it can become a powerful weapon. Lap after lap, the pressure continued. The gap between the top two trucks remained small. Behind them, another group of drivers was fighting for the top 5. Every position mattered. The championship implications were also beginning to become clear. Drivers competing for the season-long title could not afford to simply focus on winning. They also needed to avoid major mistakes and collect as many points as possible. That meant every restart became a high-risk situation. As the race entered the middle stages, the pace became even more intense. Drivers were beginning to understand exactly what their trucks needed. Some teams adjusted their setups during pit stops, trying to improve handling. The restart created another battle into turn 1. Several trucks moved 3 wide, and the intensity increased immediately. Drivers knew they had limited opportunities to gain positions. One driver made an aggressive move down the inside. Another tried to cross over and regain the position. The trucks came extremely close, but the drivers managed to keep them pointed in the right direction. The crowd responded with huge excitement. This is exactly what fans expect from NASCAR short-track racing. The race continued, and the leaders began separating themselves once again. At this stage, the difference between a good truck and a great truck became obvious. The fastest drivers could enter the corner deeper, rotate the truck quickly, and get back to the throttle without losing momentum. But doing that repeatedly without damaging the tires was the real challenge. As the laps clicked away, fuel strategy entered the conversation. Crew chiefs had to calculate whether their drivers could reach the end of the stage or race on the fuel they had. A caution could completely change those calculations. The uncertainty kept everyone guessing. The final portion of the race was approaching, and the pressure increased dramatically. Drivers who had been conservative earlier began becoming more aggressive. Positions that seemed safe earlier were suddenly under attack. A top 10 position could disappear in a single corner. A driver running outside the top 5 could suddenly move into podium contention after a strong restart. The battle at the front remained the biggest story. The leader continued to hold the advantage, but the second-place truck refused to disappear. Every lap, the challenger closed the gap. Then the leader responded. The two trucks began running almost identical lap times. The difference between them was measured in fractions of a second. With the finish approaching, the question was no longer about who had the fastest truck. It was about who could handle the pressure. Then came another caution. The field slowed. The drivers headed toward pit road or prepared for another restart. The entire race had been reset once again. This was now a sprint to the finish. Fresh tires became incredibly important. Crew members worked at incredible speed. Tires were changed. Fuel was added. Adjustments were made. Drivers returned to the track and prepared for one of the most important restarts of the race. The green flag waved again. The trucks charged forward. The leader got a strong jump, but the challenger immediately moved into attack mode. Into turn one, the two trucks were nearly side by side. The challenger pushed hard. The leader held the preferred line. Behind them, the battle for third became just as intense. Two drivers raced door to door, with both refusing to back off. The final laps were approaching. The crowd was standing. The crews were watching timing screens. The drivers were completely focused. Every corner could decide the outcome. With only a few laps remaining, the leader finally began opening a small gap. But the challenger was not finished. One mistake, one missed corner, one tire locking up, one unexpected slide. That was all it would take. The leader continued to hit every braking point perfectly. The truck remained stable. The tires were holding. The finish line was getting closer. Then the white flag appeared. One lap remained. This was it. The leader entered turn one for the final time. The challenger was still pushing. The gap remained small, but there was not enough time for another major attack. Through the final corners, both drivers gave everything they had. The leader exited the final turn and accelerated toward the checkered flag. The flag waved. The race was over. Victory had been decided after an afternoon filled with strategy, pressure, close racing, and nonstop competition. Behind the winner, the field crossed the line with several drivers celebrating strong finishes and others wondering what might have been. For some teams, the race represented a major step forward. For others, it exposed weaknesses that would need to be fixed before the next event. But that is the nature of NASCAR. Every race teaches something. Every lap creates experience. Every mistake provides information. And every victory creates momentum. New Hampshire Motor Speedway once again demonstrated why short-track racing remains such an important part of NASCAR. The track may not have the massive straightaways of Daytona or the high-speed corners of other circuits, but it demands precision from beginning to end. Drivers have to be aggressive without destroying their tires. They have to protect their position without becoming too defensive. They have to trust their crew chiefs and execute perfectly when opportunities appear. And most importantly, they have to survive the chaos. For the fans watching at home, the race delivered everything that makes the Craftsman Truck Series special. There were close battles. There were strategic gambles. There were dramatic restarts. There were drivers fighting for every inch of asphalt. And there was the constant possibility that the next lap could completely change the race. The 2026 season continues to build momentum, and every result becomes more important as the championship battle develops. Drivers will now turn their attention toward the next challenge, while teams return to their shops to analyze data, inspect their trucks, and search for improvements. The championship is not won in one race, but races like New Hampshire can have a major impact on the final standings. A strong finish can build confidence. A poor result can create pressure, and a victory can completely change the momentum of a driver's season. That is why every NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race matters. From the first green flag to the final checkered flag, there is always a story developing. And at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, that story was filled with speed, strategy, pressure, and unforgettable racing action. The Magic Mile once again lived up to its reputation. The drivers pushed their trucks to the limit. The crews executed under pressure. And the fans were treated to another exciting chapter of the 2026 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. If you enjoyed this race recap, make sure to stay tuned for more NASCAR highlights, dramatic finishes, driver battles, race reactions, and the biggest moments from the 2026 season. Because when the trucks hit the track again, anything can happen.